Hello, welcome to this edition of the Evening Review. My name is Taiwan Jabela. Let's quickly look at the front page of today's Namibian Sun. Tonight I'm joined in the studio by affirmative repositioning movement activist Dimbulukeni Nauyoma. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thank you very much and congratulations to you.
What are you congratulating you for?
No, it's yeah, you see, you've started using the other hand now. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. Let's get into this discussion, Dimbulukeni. You, on the 26th of August, as a matter of fact, just as we clocked into the 26th of August, yourself and many other AR activists, including Joba Mpanda, Knowledge Pinge, and many others, actually resigned from Swapo. What motivated that drastic step?
26th of August has always been commemorated as a Heroes Day. Now, when we speak about Heroes Day, it has always been singled out to look at the element and the aspects, and you can even see the head of state speech on that said day is looking at the armed struggle, but not necessarily signifying the contribution of men and women of rhythm and energy that have contributed to our independence. Looking at the likes of Hendrik Witbooi, the likes of Chief Maharero, look at Nehale Jampingana, Mandume and Demfayo and others. So those contributions and the battles that happened before the 26th of August 1966 in Ulumbashe, where Swapo Kembo was ambushed by the apartheid regime. So when you look at those dynamics and you look at the history, how it's told, and significantly on that day, we commemorated it also at the cemetery here by Holhota, where two fallen heroes were lying there, and of course we are trying to trace the family and some, but they were also part and parcel of that shooting of that day. But the most significant aspect why we left the Southwest Africa organization on that particular day is to really say, look, after having a thorough review of our history and the objectives of our forefathers when they were fighting to liberate themselves, was necessarily to do away with corruption, do away with nepotism, do away with the ills of society, but ensure that Namibia becomes a progressive state, and also its people are not at some point pushed to the corner and also being victimized. So we were saying we want to leave that chapter behind and chart a new chapter, whereas we are fighting for genuine economic emancipation for black people in particular and Namibians in general. Now,
you also had, I'm just wondering, and I want to be a devil's advocate here. So you guys left the party merely a week before it held its extraordinary Congress, which was, to all intents and purposes, to fix its constitution so that it doesn't allow formations like AR within its rank and file and independent candidates and stuff like that. Is it truly just because of the symbolism of the day, or was it also in anticipation that you guys were going to be kicked out of the party come the 7th of September, around about there?
You see, there has always been a consistent question about membership and affiliation as it relates to Southwest Africa. Well, what we have then done and decided to do after an intensive, remember it's an intensive process of analyzing what is it that the affirmative repositioning stands for, what is it does Dimbulukeni Nauyoma stand for, and how does Dimbulukeni Nauyoma perceive himself in the next 5 years, 10 years, or until death. So that line of history associated with the Southwest Africa in terms of corruption and corrupt activities, lack of decisive leadership per se, is what we do not want to be associated with. Therefore, we then said, and we have said it countless times to say, look, when we formed the affirmative repositioning movement, we were active members of the Swapo party and also its youth league in particular. And we could, if you are seen with a cousin of yours that is from the RDP at the time, I was labeled as a hibernator. But how can I not speak to my relative because of politics? Therefore, part and parcel of the formation of the affirmative repositioning movement is to decolonize the mind from political parties and say we are human beings, brothers and sisters. We must be able to engage on the topic of Namibia. And therefore, it has nothing to do with what Swapo was going to do a week or 2 weeks later. Because our standpoint from the 9th of November 2014 was to already remove this mask of political parties and be able to engage as brothers and sisters so that the affirmative repositioning movement creates that home for young people in particular. And we have a lot of elderly guys who are supporting us. And so that we have a harmonious discussion on how do we discuss openly and frankly about Namibia. Because remember, if you're in a political party, the first thing that you are tasked to do, and that is what President Geingob was saying, that party members must be the front line to defend Swapo ideologies and the Swapo party when it's under attack. But if you are discussing development, irrespective of that discussion, when you are coming from a specific political home, you advance political discourses as opposed to realistic and tangible discussions moving the country forward.
Indeed. So AR eventually is now going to participate in this upcoming regional and local authority elections, particularly the local authority elections. We understand that you are not going to participate in the regional council elections. In other words, you do not have you're not going to have AR constituency councillors. What informed the decision to confine yourself specifically to local authorities only?
I think this is the mistake that many has made. Earlier this year in March, we had a consultative conference that was speaking to the content and character of an independent candidate, content and character of an activist. Remember that the affirmative repositioning movement has activists across all political parties and also formations in terms of faith-based and many other associations that we have in the country. And we are looking at the content and character. What is it that we are looking for in terms of a person that is going to stand as an independent candidate, for example? So those were the tough questions that we had to answer in March earlier this year. And our discussion with the activists that were there was to conclude that the person in himself must have demonstrated some sort of activism prior to standing. Remember, many people are now using Article 17 as part of a gateway for you to just become an IC, whether you are a thug or you've never cared about society, but it's an easy way to access power. And also, how do we filter and make sure that the candidate that we are getting is the right candidate? So therefore, we are saying that the affirmative repositioning movement is going to be participating in 121 constituencies. Why? We are participating and contesting because we have a vested interest on who becomes that councillor. Because the programs that we are running relates to the people. Now, if you get a councillor who has no humanitarian aspect of his qualities, then it defeats our purpose to support that candidate. And therefore, the weight in the command of instructions to support a specific candidate comes from that consultative conference that says, this is the person that we are looking for and this is what we want. Now, it relates to localities. We are looking at the transformation of the current status quo. Remember, Windhoek, for example, was one of Africa's cleanest cities. And I just took a photo, I think a few days ago, and I loaded it up yesterday. And some guy was saying, you are ill-mannered. Pick up the rubbish and put it in the bin. Of course, I did that, but what is the demonstration? There's always a demonstration to what we are saying. To say that this is where we were, this is where we are.
Yeah.
How do we go back to where we are? So we need to transform society. And we need to transform society in terms of decolonizing the mind, and also having a particular interest in localities to make sure that this is where water, potable water and sanitation is given to communities. This is where electricity, land and housing is provided for to the people, and making sure that they get it at an affordable rate, or in fact, if needs be, at a pace in which that is not where we are currently.
So basically you are saying that AR will identify who to support in the regional authority elections, but will not field candidates per se, and then you will field candidates in local authorities. Is that the correct understanding?
We are participating and contesting in 121 constituencies in 57 localities. Now, we have activists, like I said. There will be an activist in PDM that is an activist of the affirmative repositioning movement, but is a card holder of the PDM. Now, if this candidate, having passed the content and character test, is through the party system and makes it to for example, Shakati, and is contesting as a regional councillor. So the moral compass of the affirmative repositioning movement, because the candidate has passed that content and character, that candidate will be supported. So therefore we are saying our contestation and participation is merely on quality. And remember, there is now a good atmosphere from the young people in particular, and everybody else, Namibians, as it relates to regional and local authority elections. Remember, these elections people used to win with 1,500 votes. But as you walk the grounds today, there has been, we have able to create the need for people to go and vote, the need for people to participate. And therefore, that is why we are taking it very seriously, because it has always been at the periphery of politics. And people forget that it's regional councillors who are at the forefront of developmental projects. It's the councillor that must identify that we need to drill a borehole. It's a councillor that must identify that there's a gravel road that we need to scrape, or we need to put in tarred roads, or bring services closer to the people. Because that is where developmental projects come from. Now, if we neglect this and we put it just at the periphery, as it were, then how do we advance the developmental agenda of the country? So that is why we have a keen interest in making sure that we have quality and content of independent candidates, or candidates that are going to field these particular portfolios.
Indeed. And for local authorities, we are contesting in Windhoek and Walvis Bay. Is that the correct? Yeah, so now the only name that we have heard so far of a candidate is Joba Mpanda. We don't know who else AR is going to put up as candidates for Windhoek or for Walvis Bay. And that is dangerous, because as a voter, I ought to, because you spoke about content and character.
Yes.
I need to know that Simon or Pietres or whoever it is, whoever is fielded on your ticket, is a person with content and character. Now, if the only name that we hear is Joba Mpanda, it's very difficult for me as a voter to then make up my mind. Why is AR not giving us the names of those candidates?
Of course, the period, the ECN says the nomination period opens up from the 29th of September to the 16th of October. Now, strategies and tactics as a movement, we are driven by that, and in terms of ideological outlook. And remember, you want to run a campaign in which you are running a strategic and effective campaign to make sure that people understand why you are doing what you are doing. We can't give you everybody else that's running first when you do not agree with our first candidate. So the people have then accepted the first candidate that for mayoral position. And remember, the affirmative repositioning movement is the only movement that is able to say, this is our mayoral candidate. Because of the nature in which we operate within. And remember that when we are saying that there's content and character that was discussed in March this year, it was also an opportunity for everybody else who's interested to go back and review, do I qualify as a person to be part and parcel of this list that is going to local authority? Do I possess the qualities? And some of one of the biggest argument that we're having is that do you test qualification or vis-a-vis the action of a person? And I can tell you now, there's a lot of dynamics happening in the localities in identifying qualitable and content-driven activists that are passionate about humanity, that are passionate about the restoration of the dignity of the people. So we have then, of course, again, the only person who's going to contest in these elections, pronounce ourselves on who is the mayoral candidate. Why is that important to us? It is important to us and the people of Namibia because if you live in the city, you want to know who is the person who is able to bring transformation, given his track records, and also what he's able to deliver. And remember, the affirmative repositioning has been doing what it does without any political power. It has been doing what it continues to do without anything. And with the hope and help of fellow activists and Namibians and Good Samaritans. That is why we are saying that is the person we are looking for. A person who serves without position to enable to demonstrate that they can even move bigger. Now imagine if you are tasked with the 4 billion budget of the city of Windhoek. What is it that you're able to transform currently to what is not being utilized? You read every day, Toivo, that there's squabbles about the CEO position for the past 2-3 years. And it's not getting any finalization. Now the man is already going, they're saying, no, let's fire him now so to avoid more costs. So some of those things, when you look at them, and you look at a community in Havana and Koreahab that the city decides to remove that free water. It's called now COVID water. So you remove a tanker and you expect people to get water from where? Toilet, sanitation, a place in Okahanja Park. Electricity passes in front of your house. Without the city saying, if you are able to afford and pulling just your own line from, because it's already here. I can just pull my line, you don't need to spend on it. And I can contribute to that if you ask me to. But electricity passes in front of your house and you have no access to that. There's no access to toilets in our informal settlements. And we have purposely removed happiness as part of the collective discussion in terms of development.
Indeed. Now, I mean, we like looking at Namibia as a thriving democracy. And people like yourselves are usually at the forefront of this kind of narrative, a thriving democracy. We want Namibia to be a thriving democracy where we respect processes, systems, and institutions. Now, are we going to see, come the 29th of September or beyond, a list of candidates picked by Dimbulukeni and Job for these positions? Or will there be a proper process where candidates can actually stand? To qualify.
Like we said before, that there was a consultative process with a consultative conference that has happened. That's the first democratic point to say, bring everybody together, explain the program, explain the project. And in fact, the good thing about our activists is that they already understand the line of command. And they also understand what must be done and how it must be executed. So most definitely, we don't have a dark room. I mean, I think AR has been the most open organization ever, because anything we do is out in the public. Everything that we consult in wanting to do, it's out in the public. I don't know why people always feel that there's a secret dark room, that things are always done and those things happen. So of course, we have a process in which that candidates are being identified. There's a process in which that candidates are going to be nominated, candidates are going to be voted, whatever that process is. From the 29th of September to the 16th of October, surely there should be a list that is consisting of content and character, because remember, there's specific sectors that must be fielded. There's specific interest and specific need in different localities. If you have a PhD holder in Windhoek and as a mayor candidate, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need another PhD candidate holder in Swapo or in Erongo or in Oshana or Zambezi. But the needs and specification of the town would speak to the need and specification of a candidate.
Yeah.
So don't worry, that process, that democratic process is happening.
Indeed.
And of course, we are excited.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. As we wind up this interview, Dimbulukeni, 2 more questions. One is around the issue of I was writing my editorial, my column for tomorrow, and it speaks to what appears to be serious development of divisions among the opposition and anything that is not Swapo. The LPM, they issued a statement yesterday blaming PDM of dirty tactics and stuff like that. That's already divisions within the opposition, and these are major, by Namibian standards, major formations. And then you have your activist, Knowledge Ipinge, who came out last week to say IPC, Itula, they are hypocrites. They came to the fore through independent candidature, but now they are banning that process in their party. And you guys, like yourself, specifically stood with shoulder to shoulder with Dr. Itula last year, who was an independent candidate. And there was this anticipation that AR and IPC in some way would work together, but which was going to be also impossible in some ways, because if IPC field a candidate for Windhoek, I don't see AR withdrawing their thing and their candidates and back IPC. That was already going to be a difficult one. So what is happening? What is your relationship between, what is the current relationship, the status of your relationship between yourselves and IPC, especially Dr. Itula, whom you supported last year?
Well, Toivo, you see, there's things that we need to clarify to the Namibian public. And there are people who just get excited and they start posting on Facebook, Twitter, all over, and all these things. Now, remember, there is people who would want to see a fight because they benefit from that fight. That is why you've seen that we've barely focused any of our energy to that, because our energy as we speak is diverted to the registration, because it's just today and tomorrow that we have of supplementary registration. And again, I don't understand why political parties feel comfortable calling themselves opposition party. Opposing what? If everyone has the need and the zeal to thrive in fixing the country and working towards a development in a developed Namibia, I think the new terminology that we must adapt is minority party. Because then Swapo is the majority party because they're in power. Then the rest could not be in power because they are a minority. And not necessarily that they are opposing what Swapo is doing, because they all want to have a developmental agenda towards Namibia. Now, the relations, the affirmative repositioning movement, on the record, we are now putting it on record. And of course, we have a press conference to explain this in detail. I'm just giving you a hint. Is that when we say that we are beyond political parties, some people say, no, then they are arrogant. No. We are beyond political parties in a sense that we have activists in the IPC, we have activists in LPM, Swapo, PDM, DTA, RDP, APP, and all other political formations, and NIF. So if we are saying that the affirmative repositioning movement does not have a relationship with IPC, so it means that the activists in IPC of the affirmative repositioning movement do not subscribe and agree to the leadership of IPC. So that can never be, because that is why they are card holders of those political organizations. And therefore we are saying that the affirmative repositioning movement has activists across the board. We cannot afford to anger our activists who are in those political formations, because the reason why we cease to exist is also to ensure that, look, the transformation within Swapo, there must be radical politics, and we subscribe to radical politics. There must be radical politics in Swapo that transforms that organization from those that are leading it now. We would be very happy if the same processes are happening across the board, because young people must be taking the baton from the old people, and not that young old people must sit comfortably and say, no, we've died for this country, this is our party, and this is how things must work. And therefore we don't subscribe to pedestrian views. and we don't subscribe to things that do not benefit young people of this country, it doesn't benefit a young person in IPC for me to fight Dr. Itula. It doesn't at all, because how will then that young person be able to move up the ranks and file of IPC to make sure that they are moving in a productive and progressive manner to develop that political home and make sure that it is what they want to see.
Yes.
The same happens in LPM, the same happens in PDM, same happens in NEF, same happens in Swapo. That is why you see even young people who are contesting to become regional councillors in Swapo are suffocated because of their relations that we have with them.
Indeed.
And a perceived relationship to say, no, because this one is seen with Dimbulukeni, they must not feature the list.
Yeah.
And we are then saying that the young people in Swapo must work very hard to subvert some of those issues and make sure that they deliver. And for us, nothing makes us more happy than seeing young people taking discourses and taking ownership of their political movements and making sure that one day is one day and that day is very close.
Indeed. The last question, very briefly. We've run out of time, Mr. Nauyoma, but you spoke about not subscribing to party politics in general now. So how do you respond to the assertions that AR is using these elections as a springboard towards full party politics in 2024?
You can't leave political membership to want to subscribe to another. Because remember, for 30 years, political membership has kept us where we are. Families were torn apart because of political membership. Friends and friendship people even got to a point of divorce because of political membership. And therefore, we want to shape the society where we are saying genuinely that if we are speaking about developing Okuriangava, it must be about Okuriangava and not who's the one who's at the helm of it. If we are going to develop Divundu, it's now a settlement, we must be able to say what are the brains that can develop Divundu. The same way that you see people are picked or handpicked in terms of, they say it, jobs for comrades at parastatals. That is what we want to do away with and say, if Toivo is really qualified to head an organization, let it be on the basis of his merits. And therefore, that is why regional and local elections have never been explained as such, that it's about merits and quality of a person and not which political organization that person is representing. And lastly, is also to say, when the person is in power, will they be able to subscribe to our needs? Because remember, politics is meeting the people's needs at the point of need, and not necessarily subscribing to your political game. Because if people need water, you must be able to deliver water. If people want electricity, you must be able to provide electricity with the resources that you have. But also remember, regional councillors, for example, in Windhoek, are rendered useless because there's really nothing that they do. Because the city of Windhoek governs and controls all resources in Windhoek. But there is a functionalities that they can do in making sure that they are thinking outside the box beyond the traditional norms of politics to deliver to that community and also meet the city of Windhoek halfway. So ideally, Toivo, maybe to just round it off, is to say, look, our primary concern is fixing the motherland. That is why we are saying SMS 55755. When you SMS, it says, thank you very much for standing up with AR. Why? We are standing up to fix the country. It must not necessarily translate to say, no, in Oshakati, 4 councillors came from AR. No. If the young people from NEF are going to contest in Oshakati and they have content and character, we will be very happy. If some are contesting from this angle in the south, we will be very happy. So ideally, when you put the puzzle together, it must reflect a demographic and beautiful picture, whereas in you find that competent and quality people are now going to take over leadership and transform our country and fix the country together with AR.
Indeed. Dimbulukeni Nauyoma, thank you for coming back to the show, man.
Thank you very much for having us.
I appreciate it. That is Dimbulukeni Nauyoma. He's one of the leading figures of the affirmative repositioning movement that is going to contest for in the local and regional authority elections scheduled for November this year. Thank you for watching. Good night.